Your containers look exhausted, but don't fertilize them yet, and don't pull them out either. A tired tomato, a pepper that has stopped flowering, a cucumber vine with yellowing leaves, or a basil plant that looks thin and woody can make it feel as if the season is already over. But appearances in the middle of summer can be misleading. One plant that looks almost finished may still have another harvest inside it, while a greener plant beside it may already be wasting water, nutrients, and valuable growing time. The goal today is not to force every plant to survive. The goal is to make the right decision for every container. Some plants should be saved because the roots, stems, and growing points are still healthy. Some containers need a reset because the plant is capable of producing, but the soil, watering pattern, root temperature, or nutrient balance has broken down. And some plants should be replaced because the remaining season is more valuable than the small chance of recovery. Before we begin, stop the two reactions that cause the most trouble. Do not water simply because leaves are drooping at the hottest moment of the afternoon. And do not add fertilizer simply because growth has slowed. A plant can wilt while the potting mix is still wet. A plant can look pale because damaged roots cannot absorb nutrients, not because the container needs a stronger feeding. If we treat the symptom without checking the cause, we can turn a temporary problem into a permanent one. This reset applies to tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, zucchini, cucumbers, beans, basil, Swiss chard, kale, collards, and okra. These crops do not all respond in the same way. Basil and leafy greens can often be cut back and encouraged to make fresh leaves. Peppers and eggplants may rebound well if their main stems and roots are still strong. Okra often keeps producing through heat when it is harvested regularly. An aging cucumber or zucchini vine, however, may be a poor rescue candidate if disease has spread or the crown is failing. A determinate tomato near the end of its natural fruiting cycle is also different from an indeterminate tomato that still has healthy growing tips. By the end of this reset, every pot will have a clear next step. You will know what to harvest, what to prune, what to leave alone, how to correct dry or waterlogged soil, when to add fresh potting mix or finished compost, how to rebuild mulch, how to reduce heat around the roots, when a light feeding makes sense, and when the smartest rescue is to remove the old plant and start a faster crop for late summer or early fall. So do not judge the garden from a distance. Move from container to container. Look closely. Touch the soil. Check the base of the stem. Find the newest growth. The first decision is not about fertilizer or pruning. It is about whether the plant belongs in the save group, the reset group, or the replace group. Start with the main stem and the crown of the plant. A tired plant can recover from damaged leaves, a few weak branches, temporary wilting, or a short period of uneven watering. It is much harder to recover from a soft, collapsing, badly split, or rotting base. Gently steady the plant with one hand. It should feel anchored in the potting mix. If the whole plant rocks loosely because the roots have decayed, or if the base is dark, wet, and soft, do not hide that warning with more soil or mulch. The problem is structural. Now look for living growth. On peppers and eggplants, check the joints where leaves meet the stems. Small green buds at those joints are valuable. They tell you the plant still has active growing points. On basil, look below the flowering tops for pairs of healthy leaves and small side shoots. On Swiss chard, kale, and collards, protect the center where new leaves emerge. On an indeterminate tomato, inspect the upper growing tips and the healthier side branches. On beans and cucumbers, follow the vines until you find the newest leaves and tendrils. A plant with several active tips has a much better chance than a plant with only old, damaged leaves and no new growth. Do not use leaf color alone as your test. Older leaves naturally carry the history of the season. They may show heat damage, nutrient stress, insect feeding, or disease that will never disappear. A yellow lower leaf does not need to turn green again for the plant to recover. The better evidence is the newest growth. Is it expanding? Is it reasonably shaped? Is the color appropriate for the crop? Does it remain firm in the morning? New growth is the plant's current report. Old growth is only the record of what already happened. Next, inspect for pests and disease. Turn over several leaves from the top, middle, and lower part of the plant. Look for fine webbing, clusters of tiny insects, stippling, eggs, chewing, trails, powdery coatings, spots that are spreading, or leaves that are collapsing around damaged tissue. A small, localized problem can often be managed. A problem that has moved through the entire canopy and into the main stems changes the decision. For tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, kale, collards, and basil, removing a few heavily damaged leaves may reduce the amount of infected or infested tissue, but do not strip a plant until only bare stems remain. Leaves are the plant's energy system and its shade. Removing too much foliage during intense heat can slow recovery and expose fruit to sunscald. The purpose is selective cleanup, not punishment. Now, check the soil, but do not judge it from the top inch. Container surfaces can look dry, while the root zone below remains wet. Push a finger, a wooden skewer, or a narrow plant label several inches into the mix, away from the main stem. Test more than one side of a large pot. In grow bags, feel the lower sides of the bag as well. You are looking for moisture patterns, not a simple wet or dry answer. If the upper layer is dry but the deeper mix is evenly moist and the plant is only drooping during the hottest part of the day, wait and check again later. Temporary afternoon wilt can be a response to heat and water loss from the leaves. If the plant recovers as temperatures fall and looks firm the next morning, automatically adding more water may keep the roots too wet. If the skewer comes out almost clean and dry from several locations, and the container feels unusually light, the root ball may be too dry. If one side is wet and the center is dry, water may be traveling through cracks around the edge rather than soaking the root zone. If the soil remains heavy and wet for a long period, smells sour, or drains slowly, the roots may be short of oxygen. These conditions can all produce drooping leaves, but they require different responses. Then consider time. A pepper or eggplant in a long, warm season may have many productive weeks ahead. Kale, collards, and Swiss chard may improve as temperatures moderate. An okra plant with a healthy stem can continue producing in heat, but a diseased cucumber vine in a northern garden close to the first frost may not be worth a long recovery attempt. A bush bean that has completed most of its natural cycle may be less valuable than a fresh sowing, provided enough warm days remain. This is why the plant that looks worst may not be the weakest one in the garden. A pepper with sparse leaves can still have strong wood, healthy buds, and an active root system. A cucumber vine can remain green in places, while the crown is damaged and disease continues to spread. One deserves patience. The other may need to release the container. Place each pot into one of three mental groups. Save plants with sound stems, active growing points, manageable pests, and enough season left to respond. Reset plants with healthy potential, but poor soil moisture, depleted mix, excessive heat, weak support, or a damaged watering routine. Replace plants with serious crown or root problems, widespread disease, no meaningful new growth, or too little season left to justify continued care. Once a plant earns its place in the rescue group, the first job is not feeding it. The first job is removing the burdens that are using energy without returning value. Begin with harvest. Walk through every productive container and remove fruit that has reached a useful stage. Pick zucchini and cucumbers before they become oversized and seedy. Harvest beans regularly so the plants are not carrying old pods. Cut okra pods while they are still tender. Remove mature peppers according to how you plan to use them. Pick eggplants when the skin is still glossy and the fruit is firm. Harvest tomatoes that have reached the stage where they can finish ripening safely off the plant, especially if leaving them exposes them to cracking, pests, or extreme heat. Harvesting is not only about collecting food. It changes the workload of the plant. A container with limited root space has limited water and nutrient reserves. When it carries too many mature fruits, damaged fruits, or old seed pods, It continues spending resources on structures that are no longer giving you the best return. Regular harvest can encourage beans, okra, cucumbers, zucchini, peppers, and eggplants to continue reproductive growth when the plant is otherwise healthy. Remove fruit that is rotting, severely damaged, or clearly failing. A badly injured fruit will not become useful simply because it stays attached longer. Cut it with clean tools rather than tearing the stem. On tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, cucumbers, and zucchini, support the branch or vine while you harvest so you do not split weakened tissue. Clean the blades when moving from a diseased plant to a healthy one. Now remove dead material. Completely dry leaves, broken stems, dead petioles, and collapsed tissue can come off. Then remove the leaves that are most heavily affected by disease or pests. But work selectively. Take a few steps back after every group of cuts. The plant should still have enough healthy foliage to power recovery and shade developing fruit. With tomatoes, start at the bottom. Remove leaves that are lying on the soil, yellow leaves that are no longer functioning, and heavily spotted leaves that are likely to spread disease. On indeterminate tomatoes, preserve healthy growing tips and enough canopy to protect the fruit. Do not turn a stressed tomato into a bare framework. On determinate tomatoes, be even more conservative because much of the crop is produced within a more concentrated period, and excessive pruning can remove productive tissue that the plant will not quickly replace. With peppers, remove dead twigs, badly damaged leaves, and fruit that is no longer worth carrying. A pepper with a woody but healthy framework may push new side shoots from the nodes when water and root conditions improve. Do not cut it to a stump in the middle of extreme heat. A dramatic cut can remove the leaves that cool and feed the plant at exactly the wrong time. Eggplants also need a selective approach. Harvest mature fruit, remove leaves that are heavily infested or diseased, and keep the strongest branches. Eggplant foliage can be a target for chewing insects and mites, but the answer is not always to remove every marked leaf. If damage is light and the leaf is still mostly green, it may still be contributing energy. Cucumber and zucchini plants require extra caution. Their leaves are large, and it is tempting to remove many at once when powdery patches, yellowing, or insect damage appears. Begin with leaves that are dead, badly diseased, or lying on wet soil. Keep enough leaf area to feed the plant and shade fruit. Follow the vines or stems back to the crown. If the base is failing, pruning the outer leaves will not solve the central problem. Beans respond well to frequent harvesting, but old leaves do not all need to be removed. Cut only the clearly dead or diseased parts. Preserve the growing tips on pole beans if they are still active. With bush beans, consider whether the plant is naturally nearing the end of its cycle. Sometimes, the best second harvest comes from sowing another group rather than repeatedly cutting an old one. Basil is different because its value is the new leafy growth. Find a healthy pair of leaves below a flowering tip and cut just above that pair. This encourages side branches from the leaf joints. Repeat across the plant without cutting every stem down into old, leafless wood. If a basil plant has become extremely woody with very little green growth, take the usable leaves and compare the value of recovery with the value of starting a new plant. For Swiss chard, harvest the larger outer stalks close to the base without damaging the central growing point. For kale and collards, remove the oldest lower leaves while preserving the crown. These crops often look tired because old leaves have accumulated insect damage, heat stress, and dust, while the center is still capable of producing. Cleaning the outside can reveal a healthy plant rather than an exhausted one. Okra rewards frequent harvest. Old, hard pods continue drawing resources and may reduce the plant's push to make more tender pods. Cut them off, including any that grew beyond the eating stage. Remove only damaged lower leaves that are no longer useful. A tall okra plant may also need stronger support if wind or fruit weight has loosened it in the container. After pruning, check every stake, cage, tie, and trellis. Midsummer plants are heavier than they were in spring. Tomato branches may be resting on the rim of a pot. Pepper branches can split under mature fruit. Cucumber vines may have fallen from the support and created a dense, humid mass. Retie with soft material, leaving room for stems to expand. Lift fruit away from hot surfaces. Improve airflow without forcing branches into sharp angles. The plant should now look cleaner, but not stripped. It should carry less damaged tissue, less unnecessary fruit load, and better support. That is visible progress, but it is only half of the reset. Many container plants fail to rebound because the real problem remains below the soil line, where roots are dealing with compacted mix, untook pockets, standing water, and heat. Pull back the mulch and study the surface of the potting mix. Container soil changes during a long, hot season. Fine particles settle. Organic materials break down. Repeated watering carries nutrients out of the drainage holes. Roots fill the spaces that once held air. The top may crust, while channels open along the sides. A mix that worked well in spring can behave very differently by midsummer. One common problem is potting mix that has become difficult to re-wet. You pour water onto the surface, and it runs toward the gap between the soil and the container wall. A few seconds later, water comes from the bottom, so it appears that the pot has been watered deeply. But when you check the center, it is still dry. The water followed the easiest path and missed much of the active root zone. To correct this, do not flood the pot all at once. Apply a small amount of water. The first pass begins softening the dry mix. The second moves deeper. Continue until moisture is distributed through the root ball and a modest amount begins draining from the bottom. On a very dry grow bag or small pot, watering in several slow rounds is often more effective than one fast pour. The opposite condition is equally important. If the mix stays heavy and wet, if water remains on the surface, or if drainage is weak, check the holes under the pot. Roots, compacted soil, landscape fabric, saucers, flat patio surfaces, or debris can block them. Raise the container enough to inspect the base. Clear external obstructions carefully. If the pot sits flat against concrete, small feet or sturdy spaces can create room for water to escape and air to move beneath it. Do not push a sharp object deep through a drainage hole when roots fill the pot. It is easy to injure the root system without solving the cause. If the holes are too few or too small and the plant is healthy enough to move, improve the container only when you can do so safely. Sometimes the practical choice is transferring the root ball into a slightly larger, properly drained container. But transplanting a severely stressed plant during extreme heat creates another shock, so correct simpler problems first. Look for a crust on the surface. Repeated watering and fertilizer can leave deposits, while fine particles can seal the top layer. Use your fingers or a small hand tool to loosen only the upper surface, staying away from the crown and major roots. You are not digging or turning the whole pot. You are opening the surface so water can enter more evenly. If the soil level has fallen, add a thin layer of fresh, high-quality potting mix. Finished compost can also be used as a light top dressing when it is fully decomposed, cool, earthy smelling, and suitable for container vegetables. Do not add unfinished kitchen scraps, fresh manure, or partly decomposed material directly around active roots. Those materials can create heat, odors, nutrient imbalance, and pest problems. Keep the new material away from the base of peppers, eggplants, cucumbers, zucchini, beans, basil, kale, collards, Swiss chard, and okra. Burying the crown can hold moisture against tissue that needs air. Tomatoes can form roots along buried stems under appropriate conditions, but that does not mean every tired container tomato should be covered more deeply in the middle of summer. If the base is already stressed or diseased, adding soil against it can hide the warning signs and keep it wet. When roots are visible on the surface, do not automatically assume the plant must be repotted. A few exposed feeder roots can be covered with a modest layer of fresh mix. But if roots circle densely, water runs through immediately, the pot dries very fast, and the plant has a long, productive season ahead, the container may be undersized. Peppers, eggplants, indeterminate tomatoes, and okra can outgrow small pots. Moving them may help, but only if the root ball can be handled intact and protected from intense sun during recovery. A root-bound plant is not the only reason a container dries quickly. fabric grow bags lose water through the sides. Terracotta allows more evaporation than glazed or plastic pots. Dark plastic can absorb heat. A small container has less moisture reserve than a large one. Wind can strip water from leaves and potting mix. Two identical plants may need different watering because their containers and locations are different. Now inspect for signs of salt buildup. A white crust on the rim or soil surface can develop from fertilizer and hard water. Excess salts make it harder for roots to take up water, even when the mix is moist. If drainage is good and the plant is not waterlogged, a thorough watering that allows excess water to drain can help move accumulated salts out of the root zone. Do not do this repeatedly in poorly drained soil, and do not immediately follow it with another strong feeding. The purpose of rebuilding the soil is not to create a new pot around an old plant. It is to restore three things the roots need: evenly available moisture, air spaces, and a stable place to grow. Once those conditions improve, the plant can use water and nutrients more effectively. Without them, fertilizer remains in the mix, water misses active roots, and new shoots stall before they become productive. This is the point where many gardeners discover that one container contains several different environments. The sunny edge may be dry, the shaded side may stay wet, the center may be compacted, water may rush through one channel and never touch another area. The solution is not automatically more water. It is a better watering pattern, and that is the next part of the reset. Watering a recovering container is a process, not a fixed schedule. Sprint interval changes with temperature, wind, humidity, plant size, fruit load, container material, and the amount of potting mix. A rule such as watering every morning or every other day may work for a short period, but it cannot replace checking the root zone. Begin in the morning when possible. Cooler conditions reduce immediate evaporation and give the plant access to moisture before the hottest part of the day. Water the soil, not the foliage. Leaves that remain wet for long periods can encourage some diseases, and water sprayed over a dense canopy may never reach the roots evenly. Apply water slowly around the full surface. Do not pour everything against the main stem. Roots occupy much of the container, and distributing water encourages the whole root system to function. In a large pot, move around the rim and then toward the center. In a grow bag, make sure the outer areas are not drying while only the center stays wet. Pause after the first pass. Watch the surface. If water stands for a long time, the mix may be compacted or already saturated. If it disappears instantly and rushes from the bottom, dry channels may still be present. A second slow pass after a short pause often reveals whether the first watering actually penetrated. Then allow the container to drain. A small amount of drainage confirms that water reached the lower portion, but constant heavy runoff can mean you are applying water faster than the soil can absorb it. It can also carry soluble nutrients out of the pot. The goal is thorough watering without turning every irrigation into a flood. Check again before the next watering. Use the weight of a smaller container, the feel of the soil, and the condition of the plant in the morning. A pot that is still heavy and moist does not need water simply because the afternoon is hot. A pot that is light, dry several inches down, and holding a fruiting tomato or cucumber may need attention sooner. Tomatoes in containers respond poorly to dramatic swings between very dry and very wet conditions. Uneven moisture can contribute to cracking and fruit quality problems. Cucumbers and zucchini also use substantial water while producing large leaves and fast-growing fruit. Beans need consistent moisture during flowering and pod formation. Basil and leafy greens quickly lose tenderness when repeatedly allowed to become severely dry. Peppers and eggplants prefer consistent moisture, but should not sit in saturated mix. Their leaves can droop in hot afternoon conditions, even when the root zone is adequate. Check again when temperatures fall. If they recover, do not create a nightly swamp in response to a temporary daytime signal. Okra handles heat better than many vegetables, but a container-grown okra plant has access only to the water in its pot. A tall plant with large leaves and developing pods can empty a small container quickly. Heat tolerance does not remove the need for adequate root space and moisture. When a plant has become severely dry, restore moisture gradually. A sudden flood may run around the root ball. Use repeated slow applications. Once it is evenly moist, return to a consistent cycle. Do not fertilize heavily during the first rehydration. Dry roots can be sensitive, and soluble fertilizer increases the concentration around them. When a plant has stayed too wet, stop adding water until the mix begins moving toward an appropriate moisture level. Improve drainage, remove standing water from the saucer, raise the pot, and increase airflow around the container. Do not allow the plant to bake in full afternoon sun as a way to dry the soil quickly. Overheated, oxygen-starved roots need a stable recovery, not another extreme. Automatic drip systems can help, but they also need inspection. A single emitter may wet only a narrow column in a large pot. Emitters clog, lines move, pressure changes. Run the system and check several inches away from each emitter. For a large fruiting container, more than one outlet or a drip ring may distribute water better. Rain does not always water containers deeply. Dense foliage can shed water outside the pot, and a short storm may wet only the surface. After rain, check the mix. At the same time, several days of heavy rain can leave containers saturated, especially if sources are full or drainage holes are blocked. If your water is very hard, or you fertilize frequently, occasional deep irrigation with good drainage may help reduce accumulated salts. But flushing is not a routine answer for a pot that already stays wet. First, solve the drainage problem. Then adjust feeding so you are not continually adding more minerals than the plant can use. The evidence of better watering appears before the next harvest. The potting mix stays evenly moist for a more predictable period. The plant looks firm in the morning. New leaves expand without crisp edges. Flowers are less likely to abort from severe moisture swings. The container no longer alternates between dust-dry and waterlogged. But even a perfect watering pattern can fail when the container itself is absorbing and holding too much heat. Roots do not experience the air temperature printed in a weather report. They experience the temperature of the pot, the patio, the wall behind it, and the sunlight striking the container for hours. The next reset begins outside the soil. Place your hand near the side of a dark container during the afternoon. If the surface is uncomfortably hot, the root zone near that wall may be under intense stress. Black nursery pots, thin plastic buckets, small metal containers, and grow bags on heat-reflecting surfaces can warm quickly. A concrete patio or dark deck can also radiate heat upward long after the sun moves. Begin by changing the relationship between the pot and the surface below it. Raise containers slightly on stable pot feet, strips, or a sturdy stand so drainage holes remain open and air can move beneath them. Do not create an unstable platform for tall tomatoes, okra, or trellised cucumbers. Stability matters as much as cooling. If possible, move the most vulnerable pots away from the hottest reflected heat. A south or west-facing wall can intensify afternoon conditions. A railing, metal fence, glass door, or pale wall may reflect additional light. Moving a pot, even a short distance, can reduce the number of hours that the container wall is heated directly. Protect the container before you heavily shade the plant. Place a light-colored outer sleeve around a dark pot. Set the growing pot inside a larger outer container with an air gap, or use another breathable barrier that blocks direct sun from the sides. Make sure drainage is not blocked and water cannot collect between containers. The purpose is to shade the root zone, not trap it in standing water. Grouping containers can shade some pot walls and reduce drying wind, but leave enough space for air to circulate through the foliage. Crowding tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, kale, and basil into one humid mass can encourage disease. Arrange pots so leaves are not constantly pressed together, and you can still inspect the undersides. Use afternoon shade carefully. A stressed basil plant, Swiss chard, kale, or collard may benefit from relief from the harshest late-day sun. Peppers, eggplants, tomatoes, and okra still need strong light to remain productive. Instead of moving them into deep shade, reduce the most intense afternoon exposure while preserving morning and midday light. Make changes gradually when possible. A sudden move from full sun to darkness can slow growth, and a sudden return to full exposure can scorch tender new leaves. Now rebuild the mulch. A clean organic layer reduces direct sunlight on the soil surface, slows evaporation, and moderates rapid temperature changes. Use clean straw, shredded dry leaves, or another suitable organic mulch. Avoid material treated with unknown herbicides, fresh grass clippings applied in a thick wet mat, and anything containing mature weed seeds. Apply mulch over the surface after the root zone has been watered appropriately. Keep it a short distance from the main stem or crown. Tomato stems, pepper bases, cucumber crowns, basil stems, and the centers of leafy greens need airflow. Mulch pressed tightly against them can hold moisture and hide pests or decay. Do not make the layer so thick that you can no longer check moisture. Lift a small area and feel the mix. Mulch reduces evaporation, so the previous watering schedule may now be too frequent. This is an important part of the reset. When one condition changes, the routine must change with it. Mulch is not a cure for waterlogged soil. If the mix is already staying wet, covering it deeply can slow drying and hide the problem. Improve drainage and moisture balance first. Then use a moderate layer to stabilize the surface. For containers that cannot be moved, temporary shade cloth positioned to block the strongest afternoon sun can help during severe heat. Do not lay material directly on the foliage, and do not create a closed tent with no airflow. The objective is to reduce radiant stress, not to turn the garden into a humid chamber. Pay special attention to fruit exposure after pruning. Tomato and pepper fruit that developed under leaves can burn when suddenly exposed to intense sun. Keep enough canopy for protection, or provide temporary filtered shade. This is one reason severe pruning during heat can create more problems than it solves. The best evidence that cooling measures are working is not simply a lower surface temperature at one moment. Look for slower moisture loss, less dramatic afternoon collapse, stronger morning recovery, and healthier new growth. The plant should not need to fight a repeated cycle of overheated roots every day. Once moisture and root temperature are more stable, the plant is finally in a position to use nutrients. This is when many gardeners reach for a concentrated fertilizer and try to replace a month of lost growth in one feeding. Resist that impulse. Recovery feeding should support growth the roots can sustain, not force a burst that the plant cannot maintain. Do not feed a plant that is severely dry, sitting in saturated soil, collapsing from root disease, or wilting under the most intense heat of the day. Fertilizer is useful only when roots have enough moisture and oxygen to take up nutrients. First, stabilize the container. Then feed during a cooler part of the day, following the product label rather than inventing a stronger rescue dose. Container nutrients are gradually removed by plant growth and drainage, so a midsummer feeding can be appropriate. But more is not automatically better. Soluble salts from excessive fertilizer can make it harder for roots to absorb water. Combining several products can create a concentration much higher than expected. A tired plant does not need every amendment on the shelf. If you use a liquid fertilizer, apply it to already moist soil at the labeled rate. If you use a granular or slow-release product, follow its container directions and distribute it away from the stem. Account for any fertilizer already present in the potting mix or compost. Do not assume organic products are harmless at any dose. They still affect nutrient balance and can create problems when over-applied. Match the goal to the crop. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, cucumbers, zucchini, beans, and okra need enough nitrogen to maintain healthy foliage, but excessive nitrogen can favor leafy growth over flowering and fruiting. A plant that produces a mass of soft green shoots after feeding is not necessarily closer to a harvest. It may be responding to an imbalance. Basil, Swiss chard, kale, and collards are harvested for leaves, so steady leafy growth is desirable. Even so, strong feeding cannot correct overheated roots, compacted mix, or poor drainage. Use nutrition as one part of the restored system, not as a substitute for it. Watch the new growth, rather than expecting old leaves to repair themselves. A lower tomato leaf that turned yellow after prolonged stress may remain yellow. A scarred kale leaf will remain scarred. Recovery is shown by new leaves that expand normally. healthy side shoots, stable color, and renewed flowering on plants that still have reproductive potential. Give the plant time to respond before adding more. Repeated feeding, because nothing changed in a few days, can build excess nutrients in the container. Continue checking water, drainage, pests, and temperature. If new leaves are pale or distorted, do not immediately guess at a deficiency. Root injury, mites, disease, and extreme heat can create similar symptoms. When new growth begins, protect it. Tender shoots can dry faster and attract pests. Inspect them often. Maintain even moisture. Keep stakes and ties from rubbing against them. Do not celebrate a flush of leaves by immediately removing the remaining mature foliage. The plant still needs a balanced canopy. And remember the second major test. New leaves do not always mean another crop is coming. A determinate tomato may make some growth after its main harvest, but still have limited productive potential. An old cucumber vine may send a short shoot while disease continues through the crown. Recovery must be judged by the whole plant, the remaining season, and the likelihood of useful harvest, not by one green leaf. Now apply this complete reset crop by crop, because the right rescue for basil can be the wrong rescue for a cucumber, and the right decision for an indeterminate tomato can be wasteful for a determinate one. Start with tomatoes. First, identify whether the plant is determinate or indeterminate. A determinate tomato produces much of its crop in a concentrated period. If it has already ripened most of its fruit, has little healthy new growth, and your season is becoming short, severe efforts to restart it may not provide a worthwhile return. Harvest the remaining usable fruit, remove diseased debris, and consider the container for succession planting. An indeterminate tomato can continue growing and flowering until weather or serious disease stops it. If its main stems are firm, upper tips are healthy, and leaf disease is limited, it may respond well to a reset. Harvest mature fruit, remove lower leaves touching the soil, cut heavily diseased foliage selectively, improve support, restore even moisture, and protect fruit from sudden sun exposure. Do not remove most of the canopy in one session. A healthy growing tip and stable roots are more valuable than a perfectly tidy plant. For peppers, look beyond sparse foliage. Healthy woody stems with green tissue, live nodes, and a firm base can produce new side shoots. Harvest mature peppers to reduce the load. Remove dead twigs and badly damaged leaves. Correct moisture and heat around the root zone, then use light nutrition only after the plant is stable. Keep enough foliage to shade fruit. In areas with a long warm fall, a healthy pepper can be one of the best candidates for a second strong harvest. Eggplants can also recover when the structure remains healthy. Pick fruit while it is firm and glossy instead of allowing it to become overmature. Inspect the undersides of leaves for mites and other pests. Remove the worst damaged foliage while preserving productive branches. Support stems carrying fruit. Eggplants enjoy heat, but container roots can still overheat and dry unevenly. Stable water and a protected pot wall may matter more than stronger fertilizer. Cucumbers demand a harder decision. Follow the vine back to the crown. If the base is firm, new tendrils are active, disease is limited, and enough warm season remains, harvest frequently, remove only the worst leaves, restore consistent moisture, and guide new growth onto the trellis. If the crown is damaged, the vine is mostly old, powdery or spotted disease covers much of the foliage, and new growth is weak, a long rescue may waste the container. In a long, warm season, sowing a replacement cucumber may be more productive. In a short season, use the pot for a faster or cooler season crop. Zucchini is similar. Large leaves can look dramatic when they age, but the crown tells the real story. Remove dead or severely diseased leaves one at a time, cutting cleanly without damaging the center. Inspect for serious stem damage and signs of collapse at the base. Keep enough leaves to feed the plant. Harvest fruit promptly. A plant with a sound crown and active new leaves may continue. A plant with major crown damage, widespread disease, and declining production is often better replaced. With beans, distinguish pole beans from bush beans and consider the natural stage of the crop. Pole beans with healthy vines and new flowers can keep producing when pods are harvested regularly and moisture is stable. Remove dead or diseased leaves without damaging the active tips. Bush beans often produce over a shorter period. Once an older planting has slowed significantly, a new sowing may create a better second harvest if enough warm days remain. Basil is one of the clearest candidates for renewal. Harvest generously, but cut with purpose. Find a pair of healthy leaves below each flowering tip and cut just above it. Side shoots can develop from those joints. Remove flower spikes when the goal is leaf production. Water consistently. Give relief from brutal afternoon heat when necessary, and avoid leaving the roots saturated. A plant with green growth low on the stems can often become bushy again. A plant that is almost entirely woody and bare may be more efficiently replaced. Swiss chard should be harvested from the outside. Remove the largest old stalks near the base while protecting the central growing point. Clear damaged leaves, refresh the surface mix, and maintain moisture. In very hot locations, filtered afternoon shade can improve leaf quality. As weather moderates, a healthy crown can provide renewed growth. Treat kale and collards in a similar way. Harvest old lower leaves and preserve the central crown. Check carefully for caterpillars, aphids, and eggs, especially in folds and on leaf undersides. Remove heavily damaged material, but do not destroy the growing center. These plants may look unimpressive in peak heat, and then gain strength as temperatures cool. If the stem and crown are healthy, they can be worth carrying into fall. Okra is built for heat, but container limitations still matter. Harvest pods frequently before they become hard. Remove old pods, even when they are no longer useful in the kitchen. Keep the main stem supported and inspect the base. A healthy okra plant may continue producing strongly when it has enough root space, regular moisture, and a stable pot. Do not interpret heat tolerance as permission to let a small container dry completely every day. Across all these crops, look for the same proof. New growth should become progressively stronger, not smaller and more distorted. Morning conditions should improve. Water should move through the pot evenly. Pest damage should stop expanding. Flowering should resume only on plants with enough strength and season to support fruit. If the plant keeps declining after the root environment, watering, heat, and pest problems have been corrected, accept the evidence. A successful reset is not measured by how many old plants remain. It is measured by how many containers are moving toward a realistic harvest. That is why the final action is sometimes removal. When a plant belongs in the replace group, harvest everything usable first. Remove the top growth without scattering diseased leaves through the garden. If the plant has a serious disease problem, dispose of the affected material appropriately, rather than adding it to a casual compost pile that may not become hot enough to manage pathogens. Lift the root system and examine it. Healthy roots are useful evidence, even when the crop has simply completed its cycle. Dark, mushy, foul-smelling roots indicate a different problem. Remove as much diseased material as practical. Do not immediately plant a close relative into a container that still holds a serious, unresolved root or crown problem. For a container being reused, clear weeds, old roots, fallen fruit, and damaged leaves. Confirm that drainage holes are open. Replace lost volume with fresh potting mix and a modest amount of finished compost. If the old mix has collapsed badly, drains poorly, smells sour, or has hosted a serious soil-borne problem, a larger replacement of the mix may be necessary. Reusing soil is economical only when the soil can support the next crop. Choose the next planting by climate and time, not by universal calendars. Check your expected first frost and the days to maturity printed for the specific variety. Add time for slower growth as days shorten. In warm regions with a long season, bush beans or another cucumber may still be possible. Where fall arrives sooner, radishes, kale, collards, Swiss chard, and suitable leafy greens may offer a more realistic path. Fresh sowings made during summer heat need protection. Moisten the mix evenly before planting. Keep the seed zone from drying out, but do not keep it waterlogged. Use light temporary shade during the harshest afternoon conditions when appropriate. Then increase light as seedlings establish. Protect young plants from pests, because a small amount of damage can remove a large share of their leaf area. Do not overcrowd a new crop beside a large surviving plant. A mature tomato, pepper, eggplant, or okra already occupies substantial root space. A few shallow, fast greens may sometimes share a large container, but adding another heavy feeder can create immediate competition. Often the better plan is to dedicate the reclaimed pot to the new crop. The garden after the reset may look different from the garden you imagined in spring. That is a strength, not a failure. One row may hold peppers and eggplants entering a new flush. Another may hold cleaned kale, collards, and chard, preparing for cooler weather. A former cucumber pot may now contain radish seedlings. An old bush bean container may hold a fresh succession. When every pot has a clear purpose, the garden stops looking tired. It becomes a system moving from one harvest into the next. Over the following days, judge the reset by evidence. Water should soak evenly. The containers should no longer swing so violently between dust dry and saturated. Plants should look stronger in the morning. New leaves should expand with better shape and color. Basil and leafy greens should make usable growth. Healthy peppers, eggplants, okra, tomatoes, beans, cucumbers, or zucchini may form new flowers and fruit when weather, plant age, and the remaining season allow it. Do not expect every old leaf to recover, and do not expect every plant to survive. The purpose was never to preserve the garden exactly as it was. The purpose was to protect productive life, rebuild the containers that still had potential, and release the pots that were ready for something new. A tired container garden is not automatically a finished garden. Harvest what is ready, remove what is draining energy, restore the soil, water, airflow, mulch, and root temperature. Feed only when the plant is prepared to use it. Then make the honest decision. Save it, reset it, or replace it, and let every container carry your garden toward the next harvest.